Welcome, everyone. My name is Zopa, and I'm one of the associate teachers here. And we are so happy because we have 7 people in the front row here who are going to take refuge today in the teachings of the Buddha, in what the Buddha discovered about how to bring peace and joy to the world, and in what's called the Dharma, the teachings that the Buddha taught and the reality that the Buddha experienced, and the Sangha, which are beings who have realized full peace and spread it elsewhere, and also this Sangha, people here who practice together and support one another. So Lama Michael, our Lama, who will bestow refuge, will be here soon. There may have been a little mix-up on time. He might have thought 4:15, but he lives... Oh, there's a signal from the back. He will be here in 10 minutes. So I would say let's just continue to sit quietly. You can, if you need to move a little bit to be comfortable. This is Dora DeCourcy, who's another associate teacher. Move around to be comfortable, or if you know you're going to sit a long time and you want to stand a little bit. But let's keep silence and just think about what refuge means to you, Buddhist or not. What does it mean to take refuge? What would you take refuge from, and where would you go for refuge? And if you don't like those questions, you could simply send loving kindness to the refugees at our borders. And kindness also to those who are not welcoming them yet. Please stand when Lama Michael comes in.
Well, the good news is you're still here. At least I think that's the good news. Please, you can seat yourself. That's good. Yeah, 11. 11? This is a problem. Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's working.
Can you hear?
It's working.
So, first of all, I wish to thank you all for coming and for your patience. So, of course, I would like to explain a little about the refuge ceremony. And to begin with, there are individuals here who are taking the vow of refuge for the first time, and then there are people who are renewing their vow, which is common tradition that if you have taken the vow already, then you just keep taking it indefinitely. So we will align ourselves in here so that it's convenient for us, that we can have both of those groups, because you both have something slightly different to do. So, for those of you especially who have not taken the vow of refuge before, I'd like to say a few things that will make you glad to be here, as opposed to so scared you're ready to run. One thing is, not everyone who gives the vow of refuge uses the word vow. Partly, and I'm also slightly inclined in that direction, but still holding back. The word vow itself has a certain kind of ominous ring to it. Like you break this vow, something so terrible is going to happen that you'll be sorry that you tried to take the vow in the first place. So that is not the case with the refuge vow. In fact, Zopa and I were looking yesterday and just reviewing our own understanding of things, and I realized that actually we've never heard someone say that the refuge vow even could be broken. It's not quite clear that it could be broken, even if you intentionally renounced it, because it's not the same as all other vows. In this case, it's something much easier than a vow and easier to maintain. So first of all, I think we have accomplished what is the first thing to do, and that is to establish an inspiring environment. And the fact that all of you came for this, and that we will indeed take the vow together. Those who have taken it already will renew it, and those who haven't will take it for the first time. And since many of you are in the same community, that is, you'll see each other regularly, then you'll have conversations about it, and you'll learn more and explore your experiences together. And in that way, over a period of time, then many good things will come from that. In this particular tradition of Buddhism, we engage in meditation practices which are of a category called the Vajrayana. And there's two different vows that one can take. one for what is called the general Mahayana vow, and the other which is called the Vajrayana vow. You don't need to remember that. But it's just slightly interesting because there's kind of an official cheat on it that we can do something. And that is that all of the meditation practices in this tradition, like in all Buddhist traditions, all of those practices are in essence authorized by virtue of some kind of a ceremony. And the point of that is that it's important for you to feel confident that you actually got authorized. Because if you didn't get authorized, and you don't get the result that you thought you should get, which may or may not be what you should get, but if you thought that you didn't get what you should get, your confidence is lost. It's damaged at that point. That is, in this tradition and in most Buddhist traditions, the worst thing that can happen. It's almost like you woke up in the morning and you couldn't remember who you were. And you go about the day uncertain of what it is you're doing and whether you even showed up for work at the right place or not. So, having done that, it's important to understand that we will give the Vajrayana vow, even though most of you at this time probably have no clue as to what the Vajrayana is, which is okay, because the Vajrayana vow is an umbrella vow, so it covers both the Mahayana and the Vajrayana completely. And there's a slight downside to the Vajrayana, of course. And that downside is that you will hear about practices that sound very strange. If they don't sound strange, there's probably something not quite right about you. So it's totally okay that we will cover all of these things, and in the process you will hear the names of things that don't yet make sense, and it's just totally okay. And if it doesn't feel okay, or it feels like maybe it's a risky thing that we're doing here, which it is not, but if you feel that way, just recall that you cannot break this vow. In taking refuge, we are really primarily focused upon the causes of suffering for ourselves and all sentient beings, and not just physical pain and mental pain, but really quite deep causes of suffering. So generally, we could say all of the practices that we learn and do are about alleviating and finally completely eliminating that suffering and its causes completely. So everything in the tradition is focused on that, but that doesn't mean that in any given instance you would have a relationship with that or know how that process worked. But if we can remember that confidence is the single most important thing, because it is the one thing that can completely undermine your sense of your practice, your Dharma practice. You lose the confidence, it's like the wheels on your car have been taken. So it's critical to do something. If you feel like you're losing your confidence, And especially if you feel like in a conversation or a discussion with a friend or somebody, if you feel like you are playing a role in that person losing their confidence, you need to be very careful with that. So confidence is a big deal. Not to say that we will always have it. I've never known someone who didn't lose the whole thing from time to time. Or at the very least, just forgot to do anything about anything for a really long time. So there are many ways in which these things are repaired and done and enhanced and moved. But we're really talking here in the context of meditation of crossing a line, a good line, a good line. So we play with meditation. I can remember fascinated by the role of the teacher who I had only complete fascination with and no devotion whatsoever. Kind of like someone who didn't look quite human. And so you tend to look at them with a sense of fascination. So, moving right along. The point is to bring about a complete transformation of our relationship with our experiences. Not with our bad behavior or our good behavior or any of those things, but our experiences. The ones that are pleasant, the ones that are unpleasant, perhaps the dysfunctional things we do to avoid displeasant things, the dysfunctional things we do in order to experience pleasant things. When I mentioned crossing a line, what I mean is that we are crossing a line into a place where we are going to take the meditation seriously. In order to take it seriously, we first have to have some confidence again. Confidence that actually it's worth taking seriously. That there is something there to work with. That it's not just some accidental tradition that may or may not bear positive fruit. It is not that. So we need to gain a sense of appreciation, a sense of respect, a sense of confidence, again. And so what we're doing today in the ceremony for taking refuge is, it's kind of like meeting someone for the first time and somebody says, I'd like you to meet this person. I'm sure that your relationship will bear positive fruit. That is what we are doing, basically. But let's say that it's not just anybody that you're going to meet. It's somebody who you already have an understanding of. You already know this person, or you've heard of them, and you have an appreciation for them already, which is very helpful in this case. And so we want to make the most out of that. So we're going to introduce ourselves to that person in a way which fully acknowledges their present and future importance. So traditionally, in this tradition of Buddhism, this lineage of Buddhism, lineage of teachers and those who have fully accomplished these practices and been of extraordinary help to so many people, there is a particular means by which we sort of tie the knot with them and make it so that it's easy to feel inspired regularly. So the first thing that you need to do is something that we do a lot of in this tradition, but some of you may have never done any of it. And that is, first of all, we visualize. This is a tradition of grand visualization. So the first thing we do is we imagine right here with us at this time those individuals, first as human beings who have deeply accomplished the meditation practices of this tradition, and by extension really all of the great Buddhist traditions. They have accomplished these things. So we hold that in our mind, that that has happened and that we are about to meet those individuals. In other words, we're about to cross a line. We want to cross that line because crossing that line will be a support for what we want to do. And at the same time, we remember that you cannot break the vow. So there's no harm to happen here. In order to cross that line, then, we need to acknowledge the presence of these great beings. So if we just take a moment and imagine that in this situation, at a time when we feel ripe, at a time when we feel interested, at a time when we feel ready to really take our meditation practice seriously and our intention to benefit not only ourselves but all sentient beings, that is the time to meet these individuals. Those individuals we will not see in the flesh and blood, but the common sense that all of the great beings who have accomplished these practices are actually, in a way which we cannot ordinarily understand necessarily, but in time through practice, that these beings are present by virtue of our intention and by virtue of our wish to engage in these practices in order again to benefit all sentient beings. So the first thing that you do, let me ask this first. How many people are here to take refuge for the first time?
This is the front row.
That's it? The empty row?
Okay, that's the second.
Okay, the second row. All right, so that's that. So there may be some of you here also who are renewing your refuge vow. Can I see how many of you there are? Okay. And I won't ask for the third empty category of those who are here, but not really sure why you're here. You have a total right to be here and be unsure why you're here. It's okay. So when we wish to meet the progenitors of the refuge vow, we make 3 special bows to them. So we imagine that these beings are actually here, that these are just part and parcel of coming together with the intention of taking the refuge vow. That's all it takes, and these beings are here. We imagine that they are here, and we now, those individuals who are taking the vow for the first time, will need to stand up, and you are going to, each of you, do 3 prostrations. And are you going to show them or somebody else? Dora?
they've
Dora's
been
going to do it.
shown.
Oh, they have been. You've already been shown? Okay.
And they have room there.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Dora, what?
Yeah.
It's good? We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what do we have, 5 approximately people? 7. We can do that.
Yeah, you just stand in front of her.
So if you would stand up, the 7 of you, stand up, and what you want to do is, you want to, as best as you can, without making it difficult on yourself, you need, if you can see the shrine back here, you visualize that the presence of the Buddhas of the past and future as well as the present are here. And they are here specifically because we are requesting them to be here. So requesting them actually does deliver the goods. It doesn't necessarily mean that we can experience that fully, but we need to hold the view that they deliver on it. They deliver on the promise. And so they are here. And what we are going to do is we are going to make 3 prostrations to them. Not to me, but really you can say kind of to the shrines that are here, but even more important to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the great beings in the tradition. They're here. So when you do prostrations to them, you think that you are making the prostrations and that the connection is actually happening. Do you have one person who's leading you, or are you all going to just...
They're going to do them together.
Okay. So you can do those 3, and when you're done, just remain standing if you would. Okay, now that you're all standing, you can sit down and get a cushion or something to sit on. Just for a moment, I want to say a few things about the next step. In a minute, yeah. It hurts. I didn't want to do it too soon. Okay. Part of this tradition is you get a small, a little bit of hair cut from your head, and that is really an important part of the tradition. Because the Buddha was renowned for being a very good-looking fellow. And he had long hair that was also said to be very beautiful. Maybe shiny and all, like whatever makes it beautiful. But he was renowned for this, and grew up in with a very wealthy family. And in the process of things, his parents did not want him to leave the compound for fear that he would become interested in worldly things. And of course, the story goes, he did get out. Like everyone, he was probably like 17. You can't keep a 17 in a cage. So he left, and the first thing he did when he got out was he cut his hair, because it was the thing about his body that he was most attached to. And so he cut the hair to cut the attachment. So we cut a little hair in the refuge ceremony as a symbol of that. It's quite small, so just in case you haven't yet lost that attachment, it's okay. You don't need to do that here. There are many things in the refuge ceremony, like there are in the Dharma in general, that we will go over in detail in time. But this evening is really just to give you a sense of what it is that we're doing. So if we think about an explanation of the benefits of taking refuge, one of them would naturally be a lessening of attachment, especially to our bodies, whether they're healthy or not. Of course, we're attached to being healthy, but we are not always healthy. So actually, the things that's most beneficial and precious to us are the times when we are not healthy, when we wish to be healthy, but we don't have it. So we practice giving up the attachment so that when we actually don't have a choice, we're ready to work with it in a positive way. Also, we all know, anyone, I think, who's over 20 has to have the sense that we gather unhealthy, not helpful habits. If you haven't done that, you can leave. Because you must not need it. But this is not the esoteric part of the tradition. This is what we all do. So when we engage in the refuge practice and going for refuge, we enter into a place where we feel, let's say we expect, reasonably so, that there's going to be some change here. And we want that change. Even before we know what it is, we want that change. And that change really boils down to a lessening of attachment to things that we want and a lessening of aversion to things that we'd like to be rid of but can't get rid of. So generally, taking refuge, it results in removing conditioned patterns of behavior and beliefs and all sorts of things, which are very helpful, all by themselves, even if we never did anything else. It's very helpful when you take refuge to have a clear, active commitment to engage in the practices for which you go for refuge. In other words, don't just leave them on the shelf somewhere. There's no law against it, and it won't in and of itself hurt you, but you also will not get around to getting the benefits unless you actually work at these things. And they can be extremely pleasant. So let us put that on the table too. By virtue of taking refuge, the possibility of fulfilling your goals from a spiritual perspective and just from a human perspective and from the aspects of your own life that you wish would change, you are, in a sense, empowered to make those changes. Empowered partly, maybe most importantly, not by me or someone else, but by virtue of your own intention and your willingness and inspiration to do something. We all inspire ourselves to do great things, and then we don't get around to it. So the biggest obstacle of all for a long time is getting around to it. So that's partly what a community like this is for. You can talk to people who will also say, I'm not getting around to it either. Maybe we could meet in this place and do it together sometime, because then we'd both be embarrassed by not showing up. So it's just making use of the normal, really. By making use of that normal, we fulfill, let's just say, wholesome objectives. Objectives which are helpful for us, practitioners in this tradition, and helpful for others who are not necessarily practitioners in this tradition. There's a lot of talk in the tradition about merit, and merit is actually simple. Having been a Boy Scout with merit badges, I came to not like merit badges. And I still have a problem with the word. And I think that it's actually not a big deal. Merit is really like an accumulation of something. So when we do good things for others, we accumulate something. Like we feel good about what we did. Other people feel good that it was done for them. And so the goodness kind of spreads in that way. There's many more. I want to just kind of give you a general sense here of things. Good. Okay. The commitment. So in the recitation, we are going to do a couple of recitations which are important from your side to acknowledge what it is you're doing, so that when it's done, you know what you did. Continuing to visualize the sources of refuge that we did before you sat down, or shortly after you sat down, visualizing an unlimited number of great beings who have accomplished these practices and continue to nurture them in their own stream of being and pass them on to others on a regular basis. So we would like to connect with that movement, with those individuals, and learn to do those things ourselves. I can't find my little recitation. The names. Here it is. Thank you. So the recitation is specifically for the Vajrayana, as I said, which some of you will no doubt become interested in, but it's not essential, but you are likely to do that. And so way back in 1973, when some of us took refuge at that time from Kalaripshe, then he always gave this particular refuge vow because at a future date, when you were interested in pursuing the Vajrayana, you didn't have to find someone who could give you that vow before you could engage in those practices. So I'm going to read this just shortly, and then a little explanation, and then we'll start the recitation. So the recitation starts with, I whose name is. I whose name is. The I whose name is, it's you speaking, of course. And if you have a Dharma name, which you will get in this ceremony, then you need to recite that name at the point where we get to I whose name is. Then you say that. If you don't yet have a Dharma name, then you just say your given name. And by the end of the ceremony, you'll have the rest of it. So it starts with it starts with, I ask all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions to consider me. So now we are visualizing, or at the very least, holding the view that these beings are present and they are here naturally in order to help individuals who are engaging in practice of the Dharma. So going for refuge certainly qualifies for that. So we start with, I ask all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions to consider me. I ask my teacher to consider me. From the present moment, I'm reading 2 sections here, so I'm going to have to go back and tell you a piece of it. I ask the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions to consider me. I ask my teacher to consider me. From the present moment until I attain awakening, I whose name is, and then you speak your given name. In this case, this is the first section of it. You speak your given name. Following having spoken the given name, we now recite the Vajrayana version of the refuge vow as it starts. And again, just to recite it so you know what it is in advance. I ask all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions to consider me. From the present moment until I attain awakening, I whose name is. And when we go through this then, when you say, I whose name is, if you have a Dharma name, you recite that name. If not, you say your given name. From the present moment until I attain awakening, I whose name is. I take refuge. And now these names, you need to just know that this method of Buddhism is replete with a fairly large number of technical terms that reference the person who is reciting the material, reference the names of those who help to recite the material. There's a lot of layers here. So not to go into that tonight, but just so that you know approximately what you're reading. So we say, from this present moment until I attain awakening, I whose name is, and then we say the name, take refuge. And then you say your refuge name if you have it, or you say your given name otherwise. I take refuge in all the yidams and the assembly of deities of their mandalas. A mandala is kind of like a group, like a circle. You could say a circle of friends almost. I take refuge in all the Buddhas, the fully awakened ones. I take refuge in the holy Dharma. I take refuge in the noble Sangha. Sangha is generally it refers to the ordained Sangha of monks and nuns who are kind of working at that level. But we can say also that it refers to all of us who are part of a community of practitioners who work with these material on a regular basis. So, continuing, I take refuge in the noble Sangha. So those are the enlightened Sangha, the individuals who are the most helpful to us in this world, aside from our teachers and other spiritual friends. I take refuge in all who possess the eye of pristine wisdom, the assembly of Dakas, Dakinis, protectors, and guardians of the Dharma. So we will, in time, cover these things in detail, of course. But for now, we're going to recite this together. So we can start. I ask all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions to consider me. The what? Oh, yes. Good point. Thank you. I missed the point. You need to rest on your right knee. With the other leg up, yes. Now it's good to sit on a cushion while you do this, even though it isn't really long. It's long enough to feel uncomfortable. So,
sit down. Yeah, Dora is showing. You don't have to be.
Yeah, see what Dora's doing.
And put as many cushions under your hip as you need to.
Yeah, that's helpful.
And you'll have to drink it for a little while. So.
Okay? Ready? Let's do it again, since we weren't that far into it anyway. From the present moment until I attain awakening, I whose name is Sona Rinchen, take refuge in all the glorious holy lamas. I take refuge in all the yidams. And the assembly of deities. And their mandalas. I take refuge in all the Buddhas. The fully awakened ones. I take refuge in all the holy Dharma. I take refuge in the noble Sangha. I take refuge in all who possess the eye of pristine wisdom. The assembly of Dakas, Dakinis, protectors, and guardians of the Dharma. From this moment until I attain awakening, I ask that my teacher sustain me in this ordination of taking refuge. Now we go back to the beginning again and recite that 2 more times. From the present, I ask all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions to consider me. I ask my teacher to consider me. From the present moment until I attain awakening. I whose name is. I take refuge in the yidams and the assembly of deities of their mandalas.
I take refuge in the yidams and the assembly of deities of their mandalas.
I take refuge in all the holy Buddhas.
I take refuge in all the holy Buddhas.
I take refuge in all the Buddhas, the fully awakened ones.
I take refuge in all the Buddhas, the fully awakened.
I take refuge in all the holy Dharma.
I take refuge in all the holy Dharma.
I take refuge in all the noble Sangha.
I take refuge in all the noble Sangha.
I take refuge in all who possess the eye of pristine wisdom.
I take refuge in all who possess the eye of pristine wisdom.
The assembly of Dakas,
The assembly of Dakas,
Dakinis,
Dakinis,
protectors,
protectors,
and guardians of the Dharma.
and guardians of the Dharma.
So one more time. I ask all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions
I ask all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions
to consider me.
to consider me.
I ask my teacher to consider me.
I ask my teacher to consider me.
From the present moment until I attain awakening,
From the present moment until I attain awakening,
I whose name is,
I whose name is
I take refuge in all the glorious holy gurus, holy lamas.
I take refuge in all the holy lamas.
I take refuge in all the yidams
I take refuge in all the yidams
and the assembly of deities of their mandalas.
and the assembly of deities of their mandalas.
I take refuge in all the Buddhas,
I take refuge in all the Buddhas,
the fully awakened ones.
fully awakened ones.
I take refuge in all the holy Dharma.
I take refuge in all the holy Dharma.
I take refuge in all the noble Sangha,
I take refuge in all noble Sangha,
Dakinis, protectors,
protectors,
and guardians of the Dharma.
and guardians of the Dharma.
From this moment
From this moment
until I attain awakening,
until I attain awakening,
I ask that my teacher sustain me
I ask that my teacher sustain me
in this ordination of taking refuge.
in this ordination of taking refuge.
And we should do one more time.
That was 3.
We did 3.
I know.
We should do it for 4.
We should do it one more time.
We should.
Definitely. I ask all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions
I ask all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas abiding in the 10 directions
to consider me.
to consider me.
I ask my teacher to consider me.
I ask my teacher to consider me
From the present moment
from the present moment
until I attain awakening,
until I attain awakening.
I whose name is,
I whose name is
take refuge in all the glorious holy lamas.
take refuge in all the glorious holy lamas.
Take refuge in all the yidams and the assembly of deities of their mandalas.
Take refuge in all the deities
Good. I take refuge in all the Buddhas,
I take refuge in all the Buddhas,
the fully awakened ones.
the fully awakened ones.
I take refuge in all the holy Dharma.
And I take refuge in all the holy Dharma.
I take refuge in all the noble Sangha.
I take refuge in all noble Sangha.
I take refuge in all who possess the eye of pristine wisdom.
I take refuge in all who possess the eye of pristine,
The assembly of Dakas,
the assembly of Dakas,
Dakinis,
Dakinis,
protectors,
protectors,
and guardians of the Dharma.
and guardians of the Dharma.
From this moment
From this moment
until I attain awakening,
until I attain awakening,
I ask that my teacher sustain me in this ordination taking refuge.
I ask that my teacher sustain me in this ordination of taking refuge.
And now at this point, then I'm going to ask you, and you will say something to me. I will ask you, are these the means to attain Buddhahood? And when I ask you that, you say yes. Or you can say, yes, they are, whatever is affirmative. Following that, when you say that, I will snap my fingers, my right hand, and that moment seals the vow. So at that moment you have the vow, and following that then you will get your name, and we'll finish up things from that point.
You gotta cut hair.
Yes, we will cut your hair.
All of it.
Yeah, no. Okay. What? The acknowledgement, yeah. Are these the means to attain Buddhahood?
Yes.
This seals the vow for you, and following that then, one by one, you can come and we will cut a little piece of hair. What?
The cards.
Yeah, I'm looking.
To call.
Oh, here they are. Here we go. There we go. Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
you can sit comfortably or uncomfortably. That's the case for me.
yeah, they're kind of stuck together. Here, I got these. Hmm? No, not in particular order. At this point in time. I want to say just first before we do this, this is a, there are a number of things about this ceremony which are a one-off. And all of those one-offs are truly wonderful. And this is the very first time that we have had the refuge cards filled out by Sanjay Elliott, who I want to express enormous gratitude for his effort. When I first met Sanjay, I didn't believe that what he wrote with a pen could be written by the human hand. And so I so appreciated that you were here today for this. And so it's the first time that we have like actually calligraphied Tibetan, calligraphied English with your name and everything. So we wish that you have a long life, Sanjay,
Yes.
because we don't know what we're going to do when you're gone. So no special order. I will ask you to just come up, each the names as I have them. So first of all, Jennifer Chang.
Take anything.
Take anything? Well, that's a little different than everything, isn't it? Okay. There we go. Okay. Right, yeah. So now I have to say a word about the names. The names are not only beautiful when they are professionally calligraphed, but also they are meant to be beautiful in a number of ways. The names provide us with a challenge to live up to the name. And they can all be lived up to. Just like we live up to our ordinary names, they may be small or grand or whatever they are, and we do our best to live up to them. So, Jennifer, your name is Karma Tapke. No, yes. Is that right? Karma Tapke Lamo. Yes. Goddess, wise in method. So, method is a big deal in the Vajrayana. The word tapke is what refers to the method. It really means skillful means, like the ability to know what will be the right thing to do in any given situation. And of course, not many people can do that. But it's okay. That's the challenge we get. Like, we do our best to do that. And Kala Rinpoche back in 1973 used to say, like, keep this certificate. So then occasionally you go and get it out, and it's been a long time, and you see it, and then you remember, and then you think, oh yes, that's what that is. And you can read many things about the meaning of the goddess of Tapke, or the skillful means. Did you want more?
You got plenty to do.
Yeah. Okay. Laura Berg. Yeah. That's good. So your name is Karma Zopa Palmo, which means glorious patience. It's a simple name to understand, and not so easy to embody. This patience relies upon difficult circumstances that require patience, so that when you find yourself in a state of impatience, you may remember that that's the point. That it isn't just an accident, it's actually the point. The things that cause us impatient are the fuel that cooks us. It's fun.
Isn't it?
Mike Mayer. Mike Mayer. Okay. I was supposed to ask you, do you want me to cut your hair?
Yes, please.
Karma Tinli Zangpo. It means excellent Buddha activity. So because that sounds so much more difficult than the other ones, it is actually not true. They're all that difficult. It is said that ordinary beings sometimes accomplish things that Buddhas do. But of course, not with arrogance or pride or some other thing, but just by virtue of what rolls out from long-term practice, long-term caring and aspiring to help others and so on, that we do sometimes have Buddha activity. Okay? We don't need that anymore. Okay. Lisa Collins. Do you want me to cut your hair?
Yes, please.
Please. Even better. Thanks. Karma Jimpa Lamo, goddess of generosity. It's kind of another one of those things, isn't it? Easy to understand. This generosity refers, of course, not to the generosity of money, though one could give some money to someone who needed money. It could be an act of generosity, of course. So I have to tell you something, just as an element of humor, and also how interesting the names work sometimes. A Lama who I greatly appreciated and spent 2 or 3 weeks with every day some 30 years ago or longer. And I felt that I was pretty generous. And I don't mean that like in a kind of really arrogant way, but I did feel like I did nothing but work for the Dharma Center in San Francisco for like 25 years and supported myself, and I thought like I have a right to say I'm generous. He didn't think so. And so while standing in Union Square in San Francisco having a relatively nice conversation, he suddenly said, I just don't understand it. You are such a stingy man. And of course, I immediately felt completely offended. And so I made the enormous mistake of trying to justify myself. That did not work. And so his idea of generosity, and this is, I think, such a big deal. His idea of not being generous was Not that I didn't do things for others and all, but that I stood in the way of them practicing generosity by doing it for them. That was it. Instantly clear when I heard it. So I'm not going to say that to you, because the truth is that we all kind of suffer from that. Sometimes it's easy to be generous, and sometimes it's not easy to be generous in the way of allowing others to express their generosity. So I'm not pointing that at you, I don't know, but we'll see. So we'll see. Karmajimpo Lama is a nice name. Okay. It's not midnight yet, is it?
It's not midnight yet.
Keith Johnson. Do you want me to cut your hair, Keith?
Sure. Not too much.
Karma Sherab Dorje. Karma Sherab Dorje means Vajra of wisdom. So Vajra has a multitude of meanings. But the kind of straight on, uncomplicated meaning means indestructible. So it means indestructible wisdom, Vajra of wisdom. This name is in a certain way like all of the names that we get when we have a refuge ceremony. The names are kind of something to live up to. Not a contest, and not any special award for having lived up to it, but it's definitely, if you share names with each other to see what you got, you'll see that the great majority of them are things that are meant to be lived up to, because every one of us can accomplish these things to some significant degree with just determination. It's Leo Yagi? Is that? Do I say it right? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Will you say it so I can hear it?
Yeah. Leo Aoyagi.
Leo.
Aoyagi, yeah.
I'm going to ask you later.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have an envelope.
You don't need an envelope.
Okay.
You don't need an envelope.
Thanks.
You're here.
Yeah.
You're here. Doesn't need an envelope. Or anything else for that matter. Okay? So you want me to cut your hair?
Yeah.
Not all of that, huh?
No.
Yeah. Okay. How do you feel? Sorry. can give it to you now. Yeah. You also have Goddess of Patience. Karma Zopa Lama. So same thing. I have a quote from Kala Rinpoche again, 1973. Kala Rinpoche was renowned as one of the, probably at that time, the most renowned meditator on the planet. And he made a statement then which was kind of shocking. And that was that when we, in our meditation, we're always working with our meditation. We're always working with our meditation. And we're always working in our meditation with our experience. And the experiences, as we know, are sometimes angry, sometimes jealous, sometimes proud, sometimes all sorts of things that are not so good. So those are the things we're working with all the time. And Kala Rinpoche said, the best thing to work with is the experience you hoped you would never have. That's the truth. That's what he said. And I have never forgotten that. And I hope that you also never forget that, because it is the secret.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Well, somebody said there was another one.
She just had it this afternoon.
So?
June Yi.
Yeah. And what is that? What are you trying to tell me?
That we didn't have her
Oh. I see. Okay. That's easy. We are not out of ink.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah.
June.
I'm going to cut your hair.
My honor. Thank you.
Karmatinli Nima. Karmatinli Nima. Which means sun, S-U-N, like the sun in the sky, a Buddha activity. So we say that Buddha activity itself is continuous. It's always happening, always happening. It doesn't require us to be there. But if we are also realized, then that comes through us, then that comes through the person. And so then that connection is much stronger, of course, in that way. So Karmatinli Nima is son of Buddha activity. And just by the way, the Lama Karmatinli was the one who said, "You are a very stingy man," he said to me. I didn't notice that till just now. So thank you. Okay. Yes. That's it?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. We have this too. Oh, wait a minute. Which dedication is it? Oh, I see. It's this, isn't it? Prayers of dedications. Okay. Does everybody have it or just you?
We could pass them out.
Okay, that'd be good. So your refuge today, then at the end of the refuge ceremony, of course, we have to dedicate the ceremony and the refuge itself.
It's two-sided.
When we do this, yeah. Where was it? Oh, yeah, no. Yeah. That's okay. Oh, wait a minute. No, it doesn't. It's another one that goes to the other side. If there is. If not, it's okay.
Two pages.
Yeah. Okay. And yours? You want that one? Okay, just to close this one piece, I think it's a useful view to hold that forgot what I was going to say.
You said it was a useful view to hold.
Yeah, just before that. Maybe it'll come. Oh, now I remember. Prayers of dedication. There it is. Prayers of dedication. So the thing about dedication is it's a big deal throughout all Buddhist traditions. Dedication is almost as important as everything else put together sometimes. And there's a reason for that. After myself having done dedications only because I felt like I was required to do them for many years, it became very clear that the teaching behind it is quite inspirational. The basis of it is a teaching that when you engage in some kind of positive activity, it's good. It's something good. And some goodness flows from that event. However, if you dedicate that, it's kind of like rolling a ball down an infinite hill. It never stops giving. It just continues. But if you do not dedicate it, it comes to an end when the dedication is finished. Or if there's no dedication, when you've just done it, it's done. It's still good, but it doesn't provide this kind of multiplicity of the goodness. You can see that in your own actions. When you are speaking with someone, for example, who is sad, and you manage to bring their sadness into a place of joy or into some kind of understanding that is an inspiration, then you dedicate the merit of that having happened, and you feel that in your own mind stream. Because you feel that in your own mind stream, the next time you speak to that person or any other person, that same thing comes out unintentionally. So it just keeps rolling like that. So we always dedicate and try never to forget, even the smallest thing. Like maybe there's someone you don't like, and in a moment you suddenly, accidentally felt something positive for them. Then the next thing that you do is you dedicate it. In other words, you make it bigger than it was before. So this, now you have to stand up again. We're getting close to the end here. And you need to come kind of closer this way and closer this way. It's not going to hurt much. In Tibet, this dedication, which is what we're really going to recite as a dedication, it was done, and grain was tossed on the refuge takers, and when it was done in India, flowers were tossed because there were so many flowers in India and not so many in Tibet. So they tossed flowers, and we embraced that. So we have flowers. It's really nice. So we'll recite this together, and all you need to do is stand. You don't even need to recite it. We'll do it for you. But if you'd like to recite it, that's fine. Okay? To the awakened one, the one gone to reality, the one who has overcome full money. I pay homage and render offerings, to the awakening being, the great being, endowed with compassion, Teshvara, I pay homage, render offerings, and seek inspiration. May the victory banner of freedom stand firm. Through the lives, may noble conduct be completely realized. May our ethics and moral discipline be complete. May our moral discipline be faultless. May we have pure moral conduct. Through a moral discipline free from arrogance, may the perfection of morality be complete. May we learn by following the victorious ones and bring noble conduct to perfection. May we always enjoy moral discipline, stainless, pure, and undamaged. Awakening mind is precious. May it arise in whom it has not arisen. May it not weaken in whom it has arisen. May it grow steadily strong, never apart from awakening mind. May we engage in awakened activity, completely sustained by all Buddhas. May we refrain from all negative actions. May all awakening beings realize their wishes to benefit others. May the intentions of these lords bring happiness to all beings. May all beings be happy. May all worlds be forever empty. May the aspirations of awakening beings at all levels be fulfilled. Through the power of the great strength that
this ocean of existence, may all beings be freed. May teachers come into this world. May teachings shine like the sun. May the holders of the teachings and accompanying students be in harmony. May the goodness of the teachings remain for a long time.
Thank you so much. If you want flowers, you can take them, of course.
You can take them all.
You can take them all. I usually do one of two things. I had to put it where birds will get it. Or burn it. Because burning the inside is not so good. Some people have big superstition around it, you know.
Are we done? We're done?
Yeah, I think we're done. I think we're overdone.
It's good
Well
to
done.
keep Dharma material so complicated.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
just to put it.
Let us just mention that what Zopa just mentioned. It's an important thing, and you can save yourself a lot of trouble if you just follow this small thing. When the Tibetan language was developed in Tibet, it became known as a sacred language because the primary writings were precious writings for the teachings of the Dharma. And in fact, that's why the language was developed, to incorporate those things into texts and all, and they did that. So it was also expensive to make things one at a time with wood blocks and all of the old-fashioned things that they used. And so there's a tradition to not put texts on a floor where people walk. You can put them on a table. It's important not to step on them, not to sit on them. And even if that doesn't feel important, it is also the case that when we have an important guest, someone who is respected and appreciated, they feel really bad if we step on those things. And so even if we're not particularly personally sensitive, it's a good habit to get into so that when guests come, they feel like the tradition that they're bringing to us is actually being honored. So, I think we did it. Thank you. Yeah, right. Would you like to wear this, Zopa? Huh?